faith, family, business, adventure. This is the Phoenix Podcast with Ken Sharpe.
Good morning, and thank you, our dear viewers and subscribers, for tuning in to this Phoenix Podcast with Ken Sharpe. Today is an exceptionally beautiful morning, and I know I say that every time on this show, but it really is a beautiful morning. But before I talk about this morning, I want to introduce our special guest. As you know, the Phoenix Podcast show is about bringing you exceptional, interesting, exciting individuals and characters. And today I'm privileged to introduce you to Moffat Takadiwa. Moffat Takadiwa, he lives in Harare. He's one of Zimbabwe's greatest artists, and he's got a great story to share with us today. This morning I'm exceptionally grateful, Moffat, and happy. And it's for the simple reason that when I woke up this morning, I went outside, the sky was completely blue. And many mornings we wake up in Harare. We've got more than 300 days of sunshine in Zimbabwe, in Harare. And I just looked around. I went out in the morning. I had an early check-in with my team on site at Millennium Heights, the building that we're putting up in Borrowdale. And we were there at 7:30. We check in every morning at 8 o'clock. And I just felt so grateful for that moment. Looking up at the sky, there wasn't one cloud in the whole sky. And aren't we privileged to live in a country where there's such good climate? And that brings me to my first question, just to get you settled in. Before we talk about your story, tell me, what makes you happy? You know, they've done a study on happiness, and they say being grateful is actually one of the strongest drivers that make us happy. What makes you happy, and what are you grateful for, Moffat?
Good morning, Kenny, and good morning to the viewers. Thank you for having me on this platform. I'm grateful for being on this platform, and I'm grateful to have a voice to speak. So one of the things which my work do, I'm an artist, a visual artist, is to give me a voice. So I'm grateful that I can communicate to the world and the world can listen to me.
That's powerful. And how does that make you feel?
I can't say it makes me feel proud, but it makes me feel humbled because it's such a big honor to be able to speak to the world.
So let's get into a little bit about what you do. And before I introduce to our viewers you in a more formal way, I wanted you to share up front why garbage, right? And my daughter founded a company called Global Impact Network, and she believed in sustainability. She follows the SDGs from the United Nations. And she believes our actions have a large impact on the future generations of the world. And I'm fascinated to find out your art is really a sustainable art, purely 100% sustainable, because you're using things that people throw away. How did you get onto this?
There are many facets or sides to my story. The first thing is when I was still studying art at Harare Poly around 2006 up to 2008, we couldn't really find traditional art materials because of the economic situation. So a group of students that time, we ended up looking for something else which we can use to make art. And secondly, I think I had to find sort of a crux of my work through this material and build a strong narrative through what I was using. So this material ended up being a very important sort of vocabulary in my work, and it helps me speak about sort of the underprivileged, and trash is something which we regard as something which we can't use anymore, which we throw away. Yeah. And in a society like Zimbabwe, you see there's sort of a group of people who are not considered to be maybe useful in a community and so on. So my work makes me also give a voice to such people. Mostly these are people who I see as labor. I come from the farms. So farms, through our colonial history, African black people, we were only providing labor. And through the wages and through colonial administration, you would see that we were people who couldn't really contribute much. So my work looks at the reject, looks at the refuse, and gives it another life. and gives hope also to people who are in certain situations and circumstances that there's hope. So I elevate materials and give them another life, sort of. That's what I do with these materials.
That is beautiful. Taking the forgotten, the thrown away, elevating it, bringing it a new life, and making it shine. And talking of shining and showcasing, I want to talk a little bit about your works, but I'm going to introduce you formally. So you live and work in Harare, and I was privileged to go and visit your beautiful site in Mbari that you're developing, and we're going to talk about that. With the junkyard as his muse, Takadiwa weaves discarded computer keys, aerosol cans, spray bottles, used toothbrushes, and other small, found everyday objects into impressive organic forms, evocative of jewel-encrusted excess or ritualistic kind of minimalism. His choice of medium communicates his concern with the issues of consumerism, inequality, post-colonialism, and the environment, taking much of his aesthetic from the Shona traditions in which Takadiwa was raised. Takadiwa started working with found materials due to the lack of available conventional art materials during difficult times in the country. I love that. You know, we talk of the country, we went through many difficult periods in this country. Economic recession, economic decline, complete dilapidation of the economy, erosion of capital, savings completely wiped out, and lack of resources, lack of money, lack of materials. But that wasn't a reason to stop. What gave you the inspiration and the drive? You talk about that hope. What gave it to you to believe in yourself, to actually find these objects and put it together? How did it all start?
I think usually in art or in creative industries, when things are tough, people seem to find a way to really speak. And I'm lucky that I'm a visual artist. We easily also manage to find global attention because we don't have a market, because things are tough. So it works in our advantage, maybe in comparison to musicians, whom sometimes they can play in our neighborhoods and get a little bit of money here and there. So the toughness of the situation made us found global attention, and we ended up being on the international market radar for art. So it worked really good for us, and it's a force. That's our push. It keeps us going because things are tough.
So being forged from nothing is one of my favorite subjects. And my book that I wrote this year, my daughter did an autobiography for me called From Nothing. You know, when we talk of the pressures of life, if we look at the most valuable jewels we have, one of them is a diamond, right? And that starts its life as just a piece of carbon worth nothing. And yet, after millions of years and extreme pressure under the ground, it becomes into that beautiful jewel that we value so much. Pearls are formed in the mollusk, which is the muscle of a shell, aggravating it. It's a piece of sand, a grain of sand, just a common grain of sand, that aggravates that muscle, and the muscle coats it all the time with this beautiful coating that eventually becomes a pearl. So share with our viewers, take us back to the beginning, those tough times, your childhood. Tell us a bit about your history, where you were born, your upbringing, your parents, and how you became driven to achieve this greatness that you've done today.
I grew up in the farms in Karoi Urungwe, in a very small town called Tengwe. So my father was working in a hardware supermarket there. And so I would say I was not in the art peripherals. I was really outside. And I didn't know much about art, but I was a kid who loved drawing. And I had a passion for drawing, and my parents were just encouraging me. I don't know why, but they kept encouraging me, and I kept going. And to an extent where I would say I got stuck. And this became the only thing which I can do very well, and I kept doing it. And
From what age, Moffat? Take us back. How old were you?
Before school.
Before
I
school.
was already drawing.
So as a toddler?
Yes.
So we're talking 3-4 years old?
Yes, I was already
Amazing.
drawing. So even when I went to school, I struggled to write because all my books I would fill with the doodles and drawings.
Right.
And I kept going up to secondary level. In my small neighborhood, I had a bit of recognition. People were giving me small commissions to write names on shop fronts, things like that, and that kept me going and encouraged me also. I remember my father used to take some of my drawings to show to his colleagues at his workplace, and so I had a lot of family support from a young age, and when I was a young adult, because I didn't know much about this art industry, it was quite a mystery. But because I had sort of imaginations from what I could see maybe from television, and characters would portray these artists and living this nice life, and that was the imagination which I had for artists, and I had that dream of becoming that person. So when I came to the capital, to Harare, around I think 2004, I started to inquire and ask around, what should I do, where can I go? And someone told me of Harare Polytechnic, that they offer a diploma for
And
fine
up to then,
arts.
you'd had no formal training?
No.
No art teacher?
Not
no
at
one
all.
taught you to draw or
Yeah.
paint?
Yes.
Self-taught, inspiration.
And you can imagine from schools in sort of rural areas, they don't even have like art, proper
Materials.
art lessons
Right.
and so on.
Did they even have paper to paint on and
No,
paint?
no. I only started to know of proper like A3, A2 paper when I was in college.
Imagine.
Even to
And you're
know
now a young man in your
pencils.
20s, right? We're talking about.
Yes.
I believe you were born in 1983, 84?
83, yes, yes. So I managed to apply for art studies at Harare Poly, and one thing I can tell you is I gathered all of my drawings. I had a huge portfolio, and I took it to Poly and said, I want a place here. They looked at me, they say, you don't have any education background, and your drawings, they are all in sort of reject paper, which I was drawing at the back side of paper. And I didn't know also how to properly store artworks. So these were kind of taking funny color, and I was keeping them for years and years. And they looked at me, and they were kind of shocked, but it looked sad to me, because they were showing me that how can you keep works like this? But fortunately enough, I think I managed to get a place there, and I told them I want to start for fine arts. They said, no, you start for applied art and design first, then
Okay.
you major into art.
So you got accepted into college?
Yes.
And how long were you there for?
3 years, but I also managed to go to to be a resident artist. So I got to be a resident artist for 2 years.
In where? Where were you based?
At Harare Poly. The funny story is I didn't graduate at Harare Poly.
Okay.
Because I would say I was a bit rebellious, because I had my own imaginations of what an artist should do and what art should do to people anyway. So at Harare Poly, they had sort of Eurocentric curricula. You know, would start the art movements and art isms from Europe.
Right.
So the art history is pretty much centered on that. Right. And to me, I really wanted to see how art can affect real lives of my people, and how art can speak about Zimbabwean lives, African lives, and so on. And art history somehow secludes us, because art history is a European construct. It doesn't include Africa. So I got confused, and I was in a way trying to do my own thing, and I would say, why should I do that? So I was a bit stubborn, but
So you dropped out?
no.
What happened?
I started to the finish of the program, but somehow I think I didn't have friends amongst the lecturers and some people from the art department. So they somehow made me not to graduate. I don't know what they did with my papers. But the fun story is after that, I think they had to call me and ask me to be a resident artist, which is an honor which is given to an established artist, but I was still young, emerging, but I was asked to stay 2 years assisting students.
So they saw your talent.
Maybe.
They knew you had something in you.
Yes.
And so you stayed another 2 years?
So I stayed another 2 years assisting and also using facilities from Harare Poly.
And from then, where did you go? What did you do next?
From then, you know how God works. A certain man, I didn't know this man, called Tendai Grupira, just saw me with these small ceramics works, and he said, I've never seen anything like this. Young man, I would want you to come and have a studio at my ceramics factory. He had a factory along Tari Road, almost near Bromley Turnoff. There's a place called Citra Pottery, and they do ceramics work, handwork. So I just went there and stayed there for 2 years without paying me anything. He was just assisting me. So I'm very grateful to Tendai Grupira. He helped me a lot. Yeah.
And then what got you established? Where did you see yourself taking off? What was the first piece or the first thing that happened that really got your name established?
I think during those 2 years at Citra Pottery, I worked very hard. I pushed my career sort of in, I would say in private. You know, I have a friend who always say, private victories are public victories. So I think that's when I claimed my public victory that time. That time I also founded a gallery with friends. We co-founded a gallery, and I started to learn a lot about the market. So I had to read and research about the market, which is one of my secrets. And I would tell other artists that if you want to be big in this industry, you need to understand the industry. You need to understand how things work anyway. And you know, like how people understand or know soccer, they can tell you of players in Europe and how they play, how they use the left leg or right leg. But people don't know much about their industries when it comes to art. So I started to know about the industry. That was also my break. And I'm thankful to the people I worked with in that gallery, Valery Kabov, Marcus Cora. So the gallery is called Festival Gallery, is still running. So through knowing the market, I started also knowing what I should do to be in the market. So through that gallery, we started to apply for art fairs internationally, and we got into an art fair called Joburg Art Fair in South Africa, I think around 2012, and it was a break for us.
So just for our viewers to understand, so up to now until 2012, you haven't been earning much money, you didn't have a salary for 2 years. How are you surviving?
There are few commercial galleries here in Zimbabwe. In that time, there was Delta Gallery, which was doing pretty much well, but their focus was much into sort of NGO community, which is a peripheral market. It's not the real market. But it could sustain a lot of emerging artists because we would go there and the diplomats, NGO community people with.
So they would pay you something, or they would only sell on commission?
On commission, and people would come and buy, and sometimes they would do sort of art competitions, and I would win most of the competitions there. So I would have a bit of money for me to.
So you had income from your art very early. When would you say was the first time you started earning money from your work?
From college already. I think around 2008, I won a competition. I had to lie that I'm not a student. Students were not allowed to participate in art competitions because sometimes that limits the young artists to grow. Because the moment you start selling, you can start thinking maybe your work should go that direction. You will not explore much. So around 2008, I was already sort of winning awards and not telling people that I'm a student.
So tell us, I've heard that your art can, and just for our viewers to understand, Moffat gave me a beautiful book yesterday on his works, and some of these pieces are huge. They're 3-4 meters long, 3-4 meters high. If you look at them, you would never imagine looking at them from a distance that this is garbage or things that were discarded and thrown away. But I've been told some of your pieces can go for over $100,000 US. What is the biggest number something has sold that you've done?
I wouldn't want to disclose much, but yeah, around that range. And works keeps going higher and higher. And I would say we have even Zimbabwean artists who are going beyond $600,000 a piece.
$600,000 US dollars for one piece, right?
Yes.
So that just shows that art becomes priceless.
Yeah.
Because if it can start at 600,000, imagine how much that art will be worth in 10, 20, 50, 100 years' time. Priceless.
Yes.
So it's wonderful to see you breaking the norm, breaking the ceiling, Moffat, and getting Zimbabwe out there. And I want to bring you back to your parents, to your beginning. Those humble beginnings. You talked about being a toddler, your parents encouraging you. There's a philosophy that I often talk about on this show, and it's written by a guy called Clayton Christensen. He's the founder of innovation. I recommend you read his books if you haven't. He wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, and he wrote a latter book in his latter part of his life when he was suffering with cancer, How You'll Measure Your Life. And he talks about how parents, often in the second generation, and in our generation, I also came from nothing, you've come from nothing, we want to give everything to our children. And sometimes by doing that, we're actually not helping them. And his philosophy is it's not what we do for our children that makes them into who they're supposed to be. It's what we don't do for them, which is an interesting oxymoron, right? Because by not doing something for them, they find themselves. So how do you relate to that, and how do you relate your parents' influence in your life?
I think there's so much truth in what you just said. Yeah, there's a big part, of course, which parents play in our lives, and I believe my parents have got so many lessons which I learned from them by also observing. My father was sort of a workaholic. Even with his job, with a small salary, he was sort of dedicated to his job. And, even people in the farms, I think in general, the labor, they work so hard. So one of the things which I take from that is to work hard. So I'm a very hard worker and a workaholic. I think I say that because most people think creatives base their works on talent. So talent, I doubt talent. I believe in hard work. Yeah. So that's one thing which I take from my parents, and there are a lot of things, I guess, which I take from my parents.
So that spirit of hard work, of determination, of not giving up, of being consistent,
Yes.
putting in the sweat, the toil, the hours, pays off at the end of the day. Coming back to your journeys around the world, I was reading some of the solo exhibitions you've done, and one that really struck me, not that it was in Los Angeles, that's where my daughter's doing a master's at the moment, but more about the title. I just am fascinated for you to share with us, Son of the Soil. And I believe we're sitting here as sons of the soil. Tell us about this, and what did you do?
To speak about most of themes and titles in my work in general talks about what I call colonial hangover in Africa. So I believe the colonial administration didn't give sort of all tools of governments to African governments. So there's a struggle with the colonial past when it comes to how we do things, how we live our lives today. And that hangover, that residue is what we struggle with every day. So my work looks into that using everyday refuse. So everyday refuse, I think, reflects how we are living and reflect how we are stuck with our past somehow. Reflect all these things I've been talking about labor, which speaks of class and division. And class and division is based on products, is based on what we use. It's also based on culture of accumulation, which is also a very colonial idea. Accumulation, just taking, looting. And you can see with our governments today, they reflect that. The culture of accumulation, greedy. These things, we inherit them from colonial systems. So my work finds things which speaks to that, makes us think and ask tough questions, I want us to ask ourselves these tough questions every time when we sell my work.
Powerful, powerful thoughts. So tell us, in those journeys, Sons of the Soil was 2019, 4 years ago. How do you find it as an artist, selling your wares on exhibitions, selling them in art galleries? How do you find it when they don't sell? And I don't know, was it a successful exhibition? Did you sell out? What do you do with the art that doesn't sell? And how do you feel as an artist? Do you accumulate the art that doesn't sell? What happens to all that art?
When you're an international artist, it means most of the works are represented through the galleries. So let's say if I do all the production here in Zimbabwe at my studio in Bari. I ship the works to my gallery, which is organizing a show or something. So all the works, they go, let's say, to the US. I work with a US gallery and a Parisian gallery in Paris. If the work go to US or Paris, they keep the works in their inventory. They create a show, and sometimes it's within their gallery, or else they can list to a museum, or they can do an art fair, or they can... So the work will start having another life in their hands, and they can sell or place the work. So placement of the works is not just selling. Placement of the work is a conscious placement, as well as deliberate action. That's what grows the artist's price, the artist's reputation. It's out of who collects the work, where is the work placed. And so that's quite a tricky game, and that's what the galleries do. So it's not just a game of money, but it's a game of pushing the work into sort of a currency. And galleries do that. They have a team which does that, which looks into my work, which looks how they can strategically work with that as material, and how they can create important shows for me. These are not just shows. It's not me just doing another show at a backyard or something like that.
So you trust in the system. You're not looking at maximizing value from every piece. You're looking at your exposure. Those placements in prestigious, important locations gives you the credibility, gives you the exposure, the access to potentially that market that you wouldn't have through the gallery. And could you say that you have ever doubted that process, or you've been short of money and you needed to sell something to cover costs?
There is both, but sometimes galleries are like managers, agents. They also promote or push the process. So somehow they need to know what's happening with me in my studio, with my life, and they need to cushion me. So sometimes galleries can even advance huge sums of money, which is sometimes not good, to receive huge sums of money from the gallery before you sell. That's more like selling your, But galleries do cushion artists. The process, it's different maybe from gallery to gallery, but I trust the process sometimes, because I need to work with galleries I trust also, and there should be trust in that relationship.
So I want to ask you about relationships in a moment, because I listed the company Westprop this year on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, and being a public company required much more due diligence and governance control. So we appointed a chairman. His name's Dr. Louis, and he's from Cape Town, and he often says to me, Ken, it's all about relational capital. So I'm going to come back to the relationship part. But in the meantime, you touched on something that you trust, right? So what leads you to trust in something? What is your belief, your spirituality, your faith system? At the end of the day, when you can't rely on what's happening with the things you have no control of, what do you do?
I would say I believe so much in God, and I'm not a very religious person. I know religion sometimes limits us, because, but I believe in God, and I think I sometimes listen carefully to my own conscience and what God is telling me, and I go with that. That is where logic fails me. I'll go with my God.
So you're led by God's inspiration.
Yes.
And you feel God in your life.
Yes.
So tell me about these relationships. If I look at your travel of exhibitions, of residences, it's taken you all around the world to different cultures, different nationalities, different colors. How do you feel as a black Zimbabwean being in someone else's neighborhood, someone else's culture, someone else's language? Have you ever felt awkward or uncomfortable, or have you ever been disrespected?
It's different from country to country, from place to place. But because of where I am with my work, I think a lot of people have to respect me, because the good thing I think about visual arts is sometimes it's not about the person, it's about the work and the name. So my name exceeds me. My name is quite big, so they will be sometimes disappointed to see, oh, this is Moffat, because they would have high expectations, or some people would think I'm from a certain country. But yeah, because people love the work and respect the work. So, yeah.
So you've got on with everyone you've met and you've been received well and you felt comfortable?
Yeah, I've been overwhelmed. That's what I can
Amazing.
say.
Amazing.
I've been to, especially you talk about California, Hollywood. With some shows I've done in LA, I would like be on the center of a talk or town during a whole month, where people would be talking about my work in the mainstream media, and a lot of celebrities and very respected people would really follow and come and support. And I remember first time I went to California, there's this very respected film producer who's a friend. He came, took me. He's also an art dealer now. He took me to a building in LA. In that building, they have a lot of agent houses. These are houses where people manage talents. You'd find managers for Leonardo DiCaprio, managers for, you know, all these actors, Denzel Washington. And I saw like 8 pieces of my work in this agent. And a lot of people know me like they're, oh, Moffat. So these are things which can really humble you, you know, when you see, and this is a manager for Leonardo DiCaprio, and people are, you know, they know you, they talk about you in these buildings. Yeah.
What I love about you, Moffat, is the way you stay humble. Some people let fame and celebrity status go to their heads, but I see you're grounded, and I believe it's God who's in you. You know, coming back to the location, I love the mention of Los Angeles and Hollywood. As I said, my daughter moved there recently, and we got to go and spend a week or 2 with her, and we were staying in Beverly Hills. And it was my 30th wedding anniversary. I've been married 30 years coming up. So my wife said to me, let's go on to Rodeo Drive. You know, Rodeo Drive, all the big famous big stores. So I said, okay, she said, what do you want me to buy for you? I said, okay, buy me a shirt. So I said, okay, let's go look for a shirt. And normally I'm quite conservative, you know. I don't normally like artistic pieces. But we went into Louis Vuitton, and I saw this purple and pink shirt, handmade in France, with patches on it. And it was perfect. I loved it. And then they said they don't have a medium. They only had a small or large. So it didn't quite fit me perfectly. So I was a little bit disappointed. Walked out of Louis Vuitton down the road, walk into Gucci. And normally I'm not a Gucci guy, you know. But walk into Gucci, what shirts have you got? He brings out a collection. And then there was this one piece. I said, what about this one? He said, you won't believe it. It's the only piece in North America. It's the one I'm wearing today. It's the only piece in North America. And I love the light blue and the pattern. So I said to my wife, okay, I think this is the one, but let me try it on. So I tried it on, and it fitted me like a glove. You know, as you can see, it's made for me. So I wanted you to share your story, because I love your jacket. It's so unique. I also think it's a one of a kind. It's a one-piece item. But tell us about this jacket.
So there's this famous designer in Los Angeles.
There you go.
And he designs for these celebrities. But through my work, I had to meet him. He collected a few pieces from my gallery, and the gallery had to introduce me to him, say he's a big fan. And I met him, I was so humbled, and he was like, I'm humbled to meet you. I'm like, dude, He said, yeah. And he said, if you want, you can come to my studio. I went to his studio. I think on the second visit to his studio, a magazine called Ote magazine, wrote to me asking us to do an interview, me and him. His name is Johnson Hatig. His label is called Libertine. They said, Moffat, you share the same story with Libertine, with Johnson Hatig. Would want to do an interview with you both. I said, wow. So we did an interview, and from that time we became sort of friends. And I started to also trade some of my work for his very expensive jackets. Like some of the jackets, I would go there, he would be designing them for Kanye West, Jay-Z, and people like that, and say, can I, so up now I have like 10 items from him
That's
in
a
my
collection.
wardrobe. Yeah.
That's quite a valuable collection.
Yes.
So bringing to a close the show, thinking about the things that have happened to you in your life, what would you like to share with our audience that really talks to them, talks to their spirit, talks to their future? You know, we want to give people hope, especially in Zimbabwe. We've had so many difficult years. What is your final message that you want to tell our viewers today?
Wow, that's a tough question. Yeah, I don't know if what I've learned through my life is keep working and keep believing in yourself. There is God, and no matter how humble your background is, you know, God lifts people from the dust. Yeah. So that's my story.
Thank you, Moffat Takadiwa, we've had today on our show, and you've heard it from him. A man who works hard, a man who's determined, who doesn't give up, a man who accepts God in his life, a man who says victories in private lead to victories in public. I love that. I'll remember that one. But thank you so much, Moffat, for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your encouraging and inspiring story of hope. Stay tuned in. Please share this, like, forward, post. And if you've learned something today or been inspired or touched by Moffat, pay it forward and make sure someone else watches this. Thank you again, Moffat.
Thank you.
Faith, family, business, adventure. This is the Phoenix Podcast with Ken Sharpe.